Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to unpack one of the absolute most fascinating corporate postmortems of our lifetime. We're looking at the ultimate David versus Goliath business case study, the fall of Blockbuster and the rise of Netflix. We're going to explore exactly how an untouchable giant of home entertainment was systematically dismantled by a tiny underdog. Honestly, it's a complete masterclass in disruptive innovation, customer psychology, and a fatal corporate blind spot.
Just think about the sheer scale here for a second. At their absolute peak, Blockbuster was an empire. They boasted 9,000 stores globally and employed 60,000 people. Fast forward to today, and that massive, untouchable empire has evaporated into exactly one remaining store on the entire planet, operating mostly as a nostalgic tourist trap in Bend, Oregon. So how does a multi-billion-dollar valuation just vanish into thin air?
Well, to really understand that, we have to go back to a fateful boardroom meeting in the year 2000. A small, struggling startup walked into Blockbuster's corporate headquarters. They were bleeding cash, and they had a very simple proposition: buy us for $50 million, and we'll build your online brand. The Blockbuster executives practically laughed them out of the room. They viewed them as just a niche, money-losing gimmick. Today, that exact same startup is an entertainment titan worth over $200 billion. Let's explore exactly how they pulled it off.
Part 1. The late fee monopoly.
When you examine Blockbuster's absolute dominance in the 1990s, you uncover a pretty dark secret hiding right inside their core business model. In the late 90s, driving to Blockbuster on a Friday night was literally a nationwide ritual. But Blockbuster wasn't just making money when you rented a movie. By the year 2000, nearly 16% of their entire total revenue came exclusively from late fees. That means a massive chunk of their profitability was literally engineered to monetize customer frustration. They made an astronomical amount of money when you made a mistake. And that specific frustration brings us to a legendary piece of startup lore. The story goes that Netflix co-founder Reed Hastings got the idea for his company after being hit with a massive $40 late fee for returning a copy of Apollo 13 past its due date. Now, whether that specific story is a bit of a corporate myth or the absolute truth, it perfectly isolates the exact problem Netflix set out to solve: the friction. That accepted customer pain point was the ultimate vulnerability in Blockbuster's armor. Which brings us to part 2, the DVD Trojan horse. Let's look at how Netflix actually capitalized on that friction with their initial strategy back in 1998. When Netflix launched, the internet simply wasn't ready for streaming video. So they bypassed early internet limitations by placing a massive bet on a lightweight new technology, the DVD. It was super cheap to mail, unlike those bulky VHS tapes. And with that, they introduced a revolutionary model. For a flat rate of $15 to $20 a month, you got complete freedom. No late fees whatsoever, no return dates. You could keep the movie as long as you wanted. They essentially replaced a system of punishment with a system of absolute convenience. Just think about the difference in the customer journey here. On one side, you have the friction-heavy Blockbuster experience. You gotta drive there, search the aisles hoping the movie you want is actually in stock, wait in line to pay, and then live in fear of those late fees. Contrast that with the seamless, zero-stress experience of early Netflix. You just click online, you wait at your mailbox, and you have zero stress. Netflix completely removed the friction. But initially, Blockbuster really wasn't worried because they still owned the instant gratification market of getting a movie tonight. Moving on to part 3. The innovator's dilemma. Now, you might be wondering, what was the fatal corporate blind spot that prevented Blockbuster from crushing Netflix when they easily had the resources to do so? Why didn't Blockbuster just copy Netflix immediately? Well, it comes down to a concept famously defined by Harvard business professor Clayton Christensen: the innovator's dilemma. Blockbuster was simply too successful to change. If they dropped their late fees to compete with Netflix's subscription model, they would instantly kill 16% of their own revenue. Wall Street investors would have been absolutely furious. So, Blockbuster was trapped by their own short-term profitability, leaving them completely paralyzed. And while Blockbuster was sitting there paralyzed, Netflix was quietly building a hidden weapon: the Cinematch algorithm. You see, because Netflix couldn't always stock enough copies of the latest big Hollywood hits, they built a personalized recommendation engine. If a new blockbuster was out of stock, Cinematch would recommend an older, maybe indie movie tailored exactly to that user's specific tastes. Customers stayed incredibly happy, and Netflix maximized their long-tail inventory. Netflix wasn't just mailing DVDs, they were actively transforming into a highly sophisticated data company.
Part 4. The boardroom sabotage.
Because, eventually Blockbuster did wake up, and it sparked an intense corporate civil war.
By 2004, the threat was undeniable. Blockbuster's CEO at the time, John Antioco, decided it was finally time to fight back. He convinced his board to invest a staggering $200 million to launch Blockbuster online. And crucially, he made the incredibly painful decision to eliminate late fees entirely to match Netflix. And guess what? It worked. Customers loved it. Blockbuster Online started gaining millions of users, and they actually began bleeding Netflix's subscriber growth. It was a genuinely brilliant counterattack.
But remember that innovator's dilemma we just talked about? Here's where that dilemma becomes a full-blown corporate civil war. Antioco was fighting for long-term survival by dropping late fees, but this resulted in hundreds of millions in quick cash being lost from the balance sheet. Enter billionaire activist investor Carl Icahn, who had bought a massive stake in Blockbuster. Icahn didn't care about long-term tech disruption, he only cared about short-term profits. He saw the balance sheets bleeding from the loss of those late fees, completely panicked, and went to war with the CEO.
And this leads to the ultimate corporate sabotage. In 2007, Carl Icahn and the board pushed CEO John Antioco out. They replaced him with Jim Keyes, a traditional retail executive. And Keyes' very first move, he reversed the entire online strategy. He brought the company's focus right back to the physical stores to protect the old, comfortable ways of doing business. Blockbuster was literally fighting itself in the boardroom, and in doing so, they gave Netflix the exact breathing room they needed to survive. Part 5, the ultimate streaming pivot. All right, so the year is 2007. High-speed broadband is finally entering American homes, and Netflix is about to unleash their final decisive maneuver. Netflix always knew the red envelopes were just a bridge to the internet. So they introduced a tiny little feature called Watch Now. At launch, it was pretty terrible. It only had about 1,000 obscure titles because major studios wouldn't license their big hits. But Netflix did something absolutely brilliant. They gave this streaming service away for free as part of the DVD bundle. Why? Because they weren't selling the content yet. They were training customer behavior. They were purposefully willing to kill their own highly profitable DVD business in order to build the future of streaming. Consider the architectural contrast between the two companies at this exact moment in time. Netflix had transitioned to Amazon Web Services cloud servers. Their digital scalability meant the marginal cost to serve one extra customer was practically zero. Blockbuster, on the other hand, was drowning in physical debt. They had thousands of expensive store leases, utility bills, and tens of thousands of employees. Netflix was incredibly agile, while Blockbuster was completely trapped under the massive physical weight of its own empire. The climax of this whole rental war happened remarkably fast. In 2004, Blockbuster finally wakes up and fights back. But by 2007, they sabotage themselves in the boardroom just as Netflix rolls out Watch Now. And just 3 short years later, by 2010, the landscape has completely flipped. Netflix crosses over 20 million active subscribers, officially ushering in the streaming revolution. And Blockbuster? They are choking on nearly $1 billion of debt. In September 2010, Blockbuster officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The empire was officially gone. And finally, Part 6, the takeaway. We've basically just traced a corporate true crime story here, but how do we distill this down into an essential business lesson that we can actually use today? Look, Blockbuster didn't die because their technology was bad. They died because they point-blank refused to change their business model when consumer behavior shifted. They built an empire on customer pain points. They literally relied on you failing to return a tape on time. And when an alternative arrived that prioritized customer respect and convenience, the market chose instantly. The ultimate lesson here is that in business, you can either disrupt yourself or someone else will gladly do it for you. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought today. Look at your own work, your own company, your own field. What is the late fee in your industry? What is that accepted customer pain point that everyone just kind of lives with? Because I guarantee you, somewhere out there, a startup is quietly building the algorithm to replace you. If you found this breakdown as fascinating as I did, make sure you subscribe to the Explainer series for more deep dives and tactical business insights. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and I'll catch you in the next one.